Bennett is toast, my fellow travelers. Or at least he might be. Because the drip marketing for the two upcoming characters, Varesa and Iansan, has been released, and let me tell you, they might shake up the meta quite a bit. So, in today's video, we're gonna talk about Miss Taco Tuesday and her faithful sidekick and do some theory crafting about their kit, which weapons you might want to give them, as well as potential team options. And with all that being said, let's take a bite. Alright, first of all, let's talk about the kits for both Iansan as well as Varesa, but one thing I want to say right off the bat is, I know there are already pre-release sources that go into great detail on their entire kits and everything, but you gotta remember this is all still subject to change, so for the sake of simplicity, what I'm gonna do today is put everything into simple razor words. And here, I want to personally start out with Iansan and not Varesa in order to better understand what Varesa will look like. Iansan is going to be a 4-star electro character, wielding a pole arm, and if I understood it correctly, then she will be mainly off-field, functioning as an attack buffer. The main part of her kit will be her elemental burst, which will also be the thing that does the attack buffing, and if I got it right, then the attack buff is gonna apply to whichever character happens to be currently on the field, following them around, so unlike Bennett, you're not gonna be restricted to circle impact. In fact, you're actually encouraged to move around as much as possible, because during her burst uptime, she's gonna continuously consume her Night Soul points, and you wanna keep them above a certain point to get the maximum attack buff possible. In order to do that, she has a specific mechanic where if your current on-field character moves around a lot, that actually regains her Night Soul points, so Iansan seems to be pretty much the polar opposite of Bennett. Bennett buffs attack in his circle, but not if you move out of it, and Iansan buffs attack, but you want to move around as much as possible to keep her Night Soul points up and therefore get the maximum out of this attack buff. However, in contrast to Bennett, where Bennett's attack buff is only based on his base attack, meaning his personal and his weapon, so artifacts don't matter, Iansan seems to be more in line with characters like Shenhe, where your entire attack stat matters, so that is definitely something to keep in mind, especially when we talk about the weapons in a minute. Let's first though talk about the big 5-star, that being Varesa, who is also an electro character, will wield a catalyst, and I think to absolutely nobody's surprise, will be an on-field DPS. Now, if I understood it right, then Varesa's kit seems to be relatively complex, but mostly revolving around doing plunge attacks. She will apparently have multiple different ways to initiate those plunge attacks, however her elemental burst is probably going to be your preferred method. Unlike other popular plunge characters, like for example Xiao or Gaming, Varesa is not just gonna do the good old elevator where she goes up and down all the time in one spot, but apparently she has to combine those plunge attacks with also frequent charge attacks back and forth, and that is also the reason why I wanted to talk about Iansan first, because it means that Iansan will be the perfect support for her, kinda like Kujosara was the perfect support for Raiden back in the day. And just in case you're wondering when those characters will be introduced, right now we don't have any official information, but I would suspect that we're probably going to see them on the 5.5 banners, where I'm relatively sure one of those banners will be dedicated to Varesa, with Iansan being the accompanying 4-star. And before we go on, as always, if you could maybe drop the video a quick like, that would be super duper nice because it always helps me big time with the YouTube algorithm, so cheers so much for your support. But okay, now that we have a rough idea of what both Iansan and Varesa can do and how to properly use them, the next thing I want to talk about are potential weapon options that might synergize well with those two based on what we know so far. Let's start out with Varesa here. Since she is going to be a 5-star character, that means she will have a signature weapon which is very likely to be by far her best in slot. The reason why I say by far is, while yes, we do have catalysts that might work as a nice stat stick on her, none of them specifically buff plunge attacks, which is going to be the main part of Varesa's kit, therefore I think her signature weapon might be quite a bit ahead of other 5-star options. But of course, that doesn't mean other 5-star options are all garbage. We do have quite a lot of good stat sticks available, not only in the 5-star but also in the 4-star range. But on the 5-star side, I could imagine the Cash Flow Supervision as well as Wanderer's Bell would both be good because they both give you crit damage as a substat, and I would imagine that this is probably something you're looking for. And specifically the Cash Flow Supervision gives you another attack increase on the effect. So if you ask me, I would probably say if you already own one of these two catalysts, then these are probably going to be your best stat sticks. However, another good option here might also be the catalyst from Xianyun because of its massive base damage of 741 with attack as a substat, but of course we also have 4-star options. One that actually surprised me would be the Blackcliff catalyst because with its crit damage substat and the attack increase on the effect, I think this might be a pretty decent 4-star option for Varesa. And of course, if you don't mind purchasing the battle pass, then the Solar Shine would also be nice, giving you crit rate, which is always a greatly appreciated stat, as well as increasing elemental burst damage. However, we have yet to see if doing plunge attacks with her elemental burst actually counts as elemental burst damage. If not, then the Solar Pearl might actually be not all too amazing. Up next, let's talk about Iansan, and here we have a whole variety of options because Iansan is going to be a polearm character, she's going to be an attack buffer, and her attack buff will be based on her overall attack. So what we're looking for are both polearms that have a lot of attack on the one side, but on the other side, if they have energy recharge and therefore help her burst every rotation, this is definitely going to be great too. On the 5-star side, the first thing that would naturally come to mind would be the Calamity Queller. This one is Shenhe's signature weapon. It has a ton of base attack and gives you even more attack on the substat. But also, the Engulfing Lightning might be pretty darn good with all the energy recharge that it provides for you, so that makes it much easier for you to burst every rotation. And not just that, the effect also increases your attack further. Same thing, by the way, also goes for the Skyward Spine, which is a weapon that you can just get from the standard banner, so it might be that a lot of you already happen to have it. But if you're looking for just more attack, then also the Vortex Vanquisher might be nice, with its fat 49.6% attack substat. However, don't worry, there are of course also always 4-star options, and here you can safely go for pretty much anything that gives you attack or energy recharge. Specifically, and I want to make this very clear, the brand new event exclusive polearm from the Makawa Flower Festival that I made a whole video about yesterday would be absolutely amazing on Iansan because it not only gives you a lot of energy recharge, but the effect will give you another fat attack buff. Therefore, make sure to play the event, get all the refinement materials to not miss out on this awesome, completely free 4-star weapon. As you see, a lot of good weapon options already available. However, what you're probably more interested in is not so much the weapons, but rather which teams would Iansan and Varesa be nice in. So let's talk about this right now, starting out with Varesa. And the first thing I want to say here is, yes, she is an Electro-Catalyst character, and yes, that means we can expect her to always do Electro-infused damage, but that does not mean that she is a good Hyper Bloom character. Please do not play her in a Hyper Bloom team. Here's why. Given the fact that she releases together with Iansan, and Iansan is an attack buffer, we can basically take it as a given that also Varesa will scale with attack, not with elemental mastery, so Hyper Bloom unfortunately has zero synergy with what you actually want to build her for. Another popular option here would be Quicken teams, but also here I don't think she's gonna be all too amazing. Of course, it will probably be possible, but Varesa, from her description, will probably not be a character who deals a whole lot of small hits, but rather deals fewer, therefore very heavy plunge attack damage instances. And here, unfortunately, the very nature of Quicken teams is that they work better if they amplify more smaller hits rather than fewer bigger ones. So yeah, long story short, Quicken Varesa is probably going to be possible, but I don't think it will be one of her best teams. Same thing, by the way, goes with Taser teams. Also here, applying Hydro and then dealing a whole lot of Electro instances is the ideal use case, which again means fewer big damage instances will probably not tase as well. However, there is one exception, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. First though, let's talk about what I personally think will be Varesa's best team, and that will be, well, Cloran's best team, Overload with C6 Chevreuse, Iansan, Varesa, and then a somewhat flexible 4th unit of either Pyro or Electro. Now, as this 4th unit, I would probably say going for someone like Mawika or Fischl would be the ideal case scenario because they support Varesa by dealing off-field damage, and especially Mawika can also hold the scroll set. However, using Bennett or Kujusara as a buffer, I think both of them will not be all too great in Varesa teams. Bennett will be bad because Varesa needs to storm around a lot, so she cannot stay within his circle impact. And while Kujasara specifically is great as a buffer for Electro on-field DPSs, her attack buff unfortunately only lasts for 6 seconds, and from the description of Varesa's kit, it kinda sounds like she wants to stay on the field for a bit longer. Another great combination for Varesa that I could imagine would be pairing her up with Shan Yun. Pretty obvious, right? Shan Yun buffs plunge damage, so I could totally imagine Shan Yun would also be in one of her best teams, probably combined with both Shilonen and Varena, and that's also the one big exception to Taser teams that I could think of, because this might actually be good. You know, Shan Yun doing the plunge attack buffing while providing team-wide heal, Varena massively buffing your damage, perfect synergy with Shan Yun, and then naturally Shilonen for the resistance shred and even more heal should you need it. If you have other ideas, then also let us know in the comments down below. But now let's also talk about Iansan. As we already established, Iansan is an off-field attack buffer, and given the fact that she is of course from Natlan, that means she can hold the scroll set and therefore provide even more attack buffs to all the teams out there. The main difference to the other big attack buffers, Bennett and Kujasara, is that Iansan is ideal on characters that also want to move around a lot. So if you ask me, the ones that will probably benefit most from her are of course Varesa, because that's like her ideal partner, but also for example Chlorant with her zipping around all the time. If that counts as movement for Iansan, then I think Chlorant is gonna like her a lot. Same thing goes, by the way, also for Hu Tao, who zips around a lot with her charge attacks, Kaniche, who is a very mobile DPS too, and of course, Maoika if you play her in an on-field role, because if there's one thing that she is, then definitely not stationary. However, on the other side, if you have more melee-focused DPS characters, like for example Arlecchino, then I don't think Iansan is going to be all that amazing because you're essentially not moving around too much. In this case, I would say Bennett is still the ideal option, and if you have her, especially for Electro on-field DPS units, talking about Raiden, talking about Chlorant, and then yes, also Kujasara is still a viable buffer. And just in case you have no idea what I was referring to with that thing, then check out this video right here. I promise you, you don't want to miss this weapon. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, travel smart.